Kurtop here, and these are the 100 most mysterious artifacts found by archaeologists. UFO on the cover of an 18th century book. The discovery of a UFO image on the cover of a book by Johann Funk, published in 1716, sparked massive debates among ufologists. This image, depicting a classic flying saucer surrounded by bright lightning, is seen by many as proof that alien visitors came to Earth as far back as 300 years ago. Despite disagreements about whether alien visits actually occurred in the 1700s, the discovery confirms that people of that time were also interested in the idea of extraterrestrial civilizations. As always, people are divided into two types. Some believe in UFOs, while others are skeptical about such assumptions. Ufologists are wondering about the technological development of the aliens. If we assume that they really visited Earth in the 18th century, then how did their technology remain unchanged for 3 centuries? This refers to the shape of the alien spacecraft. The statue of a mongoose from ancient Egypt. This artifact is not only a fascinating find, but also one of mystical significance. In ancient Egyptian mythology, the mongoose was associated with divine forces of light and protection. In Heliopolis, the center of the cult of the sun god Ra, the mongoose symbolized the victory of light over darkness. According to myths, the god Ra, taking the form of a mongoose, fought Apophis, the serpent of chaos who threatened the solar bark. This bronze statue with a solar disk symbolizes the sun's reward. Mongooses represent energy and immortality. Such artifacts were often placed in temples or used in rituals for protection from evil. Interestingly, some researchers suggest that the mongoose, with its ability to hunt snakes, also symbolized the skill to overcome difficulties and defeat enemies, both spiritual and physical. Many similar figurines have been found in tombs where they likely served as amulets to help the souls of the deceased overcome dangers in the afterlife. Mongooses, which became part of sacred Egyptian symbolism, remain a reminder of the deep connections between nature, religion, and the spiritual philosophy of this ancient city. Gold coins are hidden in the wall. In the wall of a nature reserve on the Golan Heights, archaeologists have discovered a hoard of gold coins. What is unique about this discovery, you may ask? The fact is that this territory was annexed by Israel from Syria during the Six-Day War in 1967. These coins may shed light on the ancient Muslim conquest. In this region, 44 pure gold coins were discovered. All the coins bore images of the emperors Phocas and Heraclius. The wall was built in 635 AD. That year, the Muslims took control of this territory, although there had previously been a Christian settlement here. The Byzantine Empire, the eastern part of the Roman Empire, was actually the longest-lasting medieval empire, existing for more than 1,000 years. The place where the coins were found is known in the Christian world as Banias. It was significant because it was supposedly here that Jesus said to Peter, "On this rock I will build my church." The coins confirm the fact that numerous military conflicts took place in this area. The territory was important for Christians, Jews, and Muslims alike. In 410 AD, after the fall of Rome and the barbarian invasions, the Byzantine Empire began to flourish. It is unlikely that we will ever find out who owned the gold coins and why he hid them in the wall. But perhaps we can restore historical justice, which thousands of archaeologists around the world are striving for. A human skeleton in a flooded cave. At the beginning of the video, we will travel to the Caribbean coast of Mexico to a cave system that was flooded at the end of the Ice Age. Here, an amateur archaeologist discovered the skeleton of a prehistoric human that is over 8,000 years old. I should note that these are not the first human remains to be found here. The government plans to build a high-speed train through the jungle at this location and attract tourists. And as often happens, the best archaeological discoveries occur at sites of future construction. The archaeologist divers claimed that the skeleton was too far from the entrance to the cave. This means that the ancient human could not have swum that far without using modern equipment. According to other studies, around the same time the water level was significantly lower. The caves were flooded after people started living here. Who the skeleton belonged to and its exact age still need to be determined. but we do know for sure where one of the oldest human teeth on the planet was discovered. Ancient aliens are real. At the first hearings in the Mexican parliament, journalist and ufologist Jaime Maussan already tried to convince people of the authenticity of the mummies. Allegedly, they are thousands of years old. His attempts back then were unsuccessful, and the parliamentarians recalled previous incidents, mummies of the Nazca Indians, which turned out to be fake. Humanoids, resembling characters from science fiction movies, caused skepticism among the participants of the hearings. The ufologist referred to studies from the National Autonomous University of Mexico, but did not provide convincing evidence of their extraterrestrial origin. For the next hearing, ufologist Maussan invited anthropologist Roger Zuniga, who stated that there were no traces of human intervention in the formation of the humanoids. He emphasized that their origin remains unknown. Argentinian surgeon Celestio Adolfo Piotto expressed the opinion that the humanoids could be an evolved version of modern humans, calling them our descendants. And do you believe these mummies are real? Write your opinion in the comments below the video. I'm really interested to know how many people among my viewers believe in alien mummies. The mystery of the black slime. Scientists have finally managed to solve the mystery of the black slime that is often found in Egyptian tombs. In 2018, archaeologists in Alexandria unearthed a giant black sarcophagus that was completely filled with this creepy substance. And only after several years were scientists able to understand what it was. Let me remind you that scientists and historians expected to find Alexander the Great in this sarcophagus, but when they opened it, they were shocked. Inside, there were 3 skeletons, 2 men and 1 woman. These skeletons were covered in a black substance. Conspiracy theorists joined the investigation. They claimed that by opening this tomb, humanity would be cursed, and those who opened it would release a dark force that would spread across the entire planet. Fortunately, scientists are not cowards. The researchers collected more than 100 slime samples from other ancient Egyptian burials. Analysis showed that the slime consists of vegetable oil, tree resin, beeswax, animal fat, and bitumen. At the very least, all the samples contained these ingredients. Only the proportions were different. Interestingly, all these ingredients were imported into Egypt, and the mixing was done by specialists assigned for this purpose. First, the mummy was placed in the sarcophagus, and then it was either coated with or drenched in this liquid. Most likely, in addition to its religious significance, the black slime also helped preserve the deceased. It was believed that in this way, the mummy would be safe both spiritually and physically. 6. The Summer Kitchen. Novi Gicin was presumably founded at the end of the 13th century at the intersection of trade routes from Poland and Silesia to the Czech lands and Hungary. The first written mention of Novi Gicin dates back to 1313. At that time, King John of Luxembourg granted it its first city privileges, the right to collect customs fees and duties. Archaeologists believe that the city was mostly built of wood in the past, but they admit that little is known about the medieval settlement. Medieval houses were built from wood and clay, but over time they were gradually replaced by brick structures. This process was especially active in the early modern period. Under the floor of the courtyard room at the rear of the present house, a stone foundation of an older building was discovered. Throughout the entire area enclosed by this foundation, remains of a charred wooden floor have been preserved. It was a log house built on a stone foundation. Archaeologists date it to the early 15th century. The house is located on the northern side of the city walls in the historic center. This suggests that it most likely belonged to a burgher family, part of the medieval bourgeoisie. In the southwestern corner of the room, archaeologists discovered well-preserved remains of a brick stove with a hearth, as well as a complete set of kitchen utensils, including a wooden spoon for cooking. They note the perfect condition of the medieval dishes. The ceramic pots are intact and have their original lids. It looks as if they were washed and left to dry on the hearth. Among other artifacts, glass rings were found, which could have been part of a woman's jewelry, a spring lock from a door or chest, and iron forks with 3 prongs. The finds are currently undergoing conservation, after which they will be kept in the Novi Gicin Museum. The largest treasure was taken to the dump. At a landfill, you can find anything from rare furniture and collectible printed editions to weapons and even money. But what no one expected to see at the dump was one of the largest treasure hoards in Europe. Not far from Rockwall, in the city of Środa, a treasure hoard was discovered at a construction waste dump, which was later called the Środa treasure. It consisted of medieval coins and jewels belonging to Czech monarchs of the 14th century. The hoard was discovered by workers in 1985 who were clearing a pile of construction debris from demolished houses. One of the workers saw gold coins spilling out of a clay vessel, stopped the machinery, and took the coins for himself. I should note that coins had been found here before, but those were isolated cases. When local authorities found out about the treasure, some coins and jewelry had already been stolen by locals. When the archaeologists arrived at the site and recovered everything that was left, they estimated its value at $100 to $120 million. Among the most valuable items that were excavated was a royal crown that belonged to Blanche of Valois, the wife of King Charles IV of Bohemia. That's how, by chance, ordinary workers were able to find one of the most expensive treasures in Europe. From gold coins, we will abruptly move on to drawings of ancient people with giant heads. Thousands of archaeologists are demanding justice. Prime Minister of Egypt, Mustafa Madbouly, along with archaeologists, is trying to achieve the return of the Rosetta Stone and 16 other artifacts back to Egypt. I fully support them because the history of ancient Egypt should belong to modern Egypt. Prime Minister Mustafa says that the artifacts were taken out of the country illegally and unethically. He created a petition that has already gathered more than 2,500 signatures. Previously, the Egyptian government asked the United Kingdom to return the artifacts to their homeland, but now they are demanding it. Mustafa Madbouly claims that the Rosetta Stone and other artifacts will be repatriated. It's only a matter of time. As you can see, even in the world of archaeology, global events are happening that no one could have imagined before. The Rosetta Stone was discovered in 1799, a year after Napoleon's invasion of Egypt, by a French officer who was leading excavations in the city of Rashid in the Nile Delta. The stone had text in 3 different languages: Greek, Demotic, and Egyptian hieroglyphs. This artifact was seen as a key to translating between cultures, which could provide unprecedented insight into ancient civilizations. The text of the petition reads as follows: "The confiscation of the Rosetta Stone, among other artifacts, is an act of encroachment on Egyptian cultural rights by the government, value and identity, and is a direct result of cultural colonial violence against Egyptian cultural heritage. History cannot be changed, but it can be corrected." And although the British Empire's political, military, and governmental rule over Egypt ended many years ago, cultural colonization is not over yet. Interestingly, Egypt is not the only country demanding that Britain return its artifacts. For example, Greece is demanding the return of the Parthenon marbles to their homeland. But the current Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, Liz Truss, does not support the wishes of archaeologists from around the world. After all, she understands perfectly well that the popularity of British museums would decrease significantly. Have you ever thought about what it would be like if the ruler of a country was a person without a face? And something like that has already happened in our history. A human tooth that is 1.8 million years old. And now we are heading to Georgia in the South Caucasus. It is here that one of the earliest prehistoric settlements in Europe is located. And just recently, archaeologists were in for an incredible surprise again. They found one of the oldest teeth on the planet belonging to the human species. This once again confirms that Georgia was one of the first places our ancestors went to conquer Europe. Most likely, the European human species originated from this region. The tooth was discovered about 100 kilometers from the capital of Georgia, Tbilisi, in the village of Orozmani. Stone tools and animal remains were found here before, but this is the first discovery of Homo erectus remains at this site. Not far from this place, in the late 1990s and early 2000s, human skulls dating back 1.8 million years were found here. This was the first discovery of its kind outside of Africa. It forced scientists to change their understanding of human migration. Based on these findings, archaeologists claim that Georgia was one of the first places ancient humans arrived. during their migration out of Africa. According to Georgi Bedzinashvili, the lead scientist on the excavation team, this tooth belonged to a cousin of Zezve and Mzia, the names given to the owners of the fossilized skulls that were previously discovered in Dmanisi. But the oldest fossil remains of the genus Homo are still considered to be a part of a jaw discovered in Ethiopia. It is about 2.8 million years old. Scientists suggest that the first migrations began about 2 million years ago. However, ancient tools that are 2.1 million years old were discovered in China. This shows that we still have a lot to learn about the ancient world. That's what our channel is for, and it will definitely help you. Now let's move on. Scandinavian cipher deciphered. Jonas Nordby, a researcher from the University of Oslo, has deciphered an ancient Scandinavian cipher from the 12th-13th centuries known as Jotunvelur, which roughly translates as the confusion of centuries. The solution was found thanks to a wooden stick from the 13th century from the Norwegian city of Bergen, on which Sigurd and Lavrance wrote their names both in regular runic script and using the Jotunvelur cipher. This discovery became a kind of Rosetta Stone for the researcher, helping to decipher the text by reading each rune not by its usual value, but by the last sound in its name. In addition, other wooden inscriptions were found where the names Thorstein and Eidnar were written in text. Runic sticks from the 12th and 13th centuries in Scandinavia were used to send messages, similar to modern SMS. Nordby believes that Jotunvelur might have been used not so much for secrecy, but rather as a language game, helping with literacy education. So, the 800-year-old code called Jotunvelur turned out to be a joke. The message read, "Kiss me, treasure of Atlantis beneath the Sphinx." Egyptologist Roman Orikov, a member of the International Social Organization of Egyptologists, said there was little chance of discovering secret chambers and treasures of Atlantis under the Egyptian pyramids. He pointed out that the pyramids had been studied for centuries, and if there was anything there, scientists would have found it long ago. The topic of secret chambers under the pyramids and sphinxes in Giza emerged thanks to the American mystic Edgar Cayce in the early 20th century, and although excavations were attempted in the past, nothing of the sort was found. Now the Egyptian authorities prohibit such research, which confirms the absence of hidden chambers. The Egyptologist also emphasizes the differences in the concept of treasure between the present and the past. For the ancient Egyptians who lived in conditions where the main clothing was a loincloth, modern ideas about treasures do not reflect reality. The theory of Egyptologist Farouk Elbaz about the natural origin of the Great Sphinx is mentioned separately. Construction expert Fedor Vasiliev considers it logical, noting that the main material of the sculpture is limestone, which by itself is too strong. In his opinion, erosion could have formed only the general outline, and further detailing was done by ancient craftsmen. I told you about this in the previous video. Three-fingered extraterrestrial mummies. A few years ago, a new discovery was made in Peru, a very strange extraterrestrial mummy, which by the end of the expedition was nicknamed Maria. 5 mummies were discovered, 1 woman and 4 men, and, according to experts, they are very similar to humans, but too different to be related to us in any way. They were discovered in a tomb near the Peruvian Nazca lines, which is already a suggestive sign that we are dealing with aliens. But the mummies also have 23 pairs of chromosomes, which could mean that they are actually human after all. They date back to the 5th century AD, a whole millennium before Europeans discovered America. Konstantin Korotkov and Natalia Zaloznaya collected tissue samples and brought them to. While Korotkov believes that this was a race of people who developed much faster than the rest, Zaloznaya is convinced that it was actually a race of aliens. X-rays and CT scans also show that Maria has a completely different rib structure than ours. It has a keel-like shape at the top, and despite the fact that the rib cage protects the creature's internal organs just like ours, it has several semicircular ribs for this purpose. In the end, they concluded that these two simply cannot be human. These mummies represent a race of aliens who lived among us in ancient times, and that's a fact. The oldest alphabet in the world In Syria, archaeologists found the oldest alphabet in the world, which is over 4,000 years old. This unique discovery was made in the tomb of el-Mara, one of the oldest cities in the Middle East. Clay cylinders with engraved symbols date back to 2400 BC of known alphabets by about 500 years. According to researchers, the inscriptions on the cylinders were probably used as labels to indicate the contents of the vessels, their owners, or their origin. Although these symbols have not yet been deciphered, radiocarbon analysis has confirmed their age, dating back to the early Bronze Age. Previously, it was believed that the alphabet originated around 1900 BC in Egypt or its surroundings. But these discoveries force us to rewrite history. The alphabet was a revolution in writing, making it accessible to people beyond the royal nobility. It changed not only the ways of communication, but also thinking, interaction between people, and the transmission of knowledge. The discovery was the result of 16 years of excavations by an international team of scientists. In addition to the cylinders, skeletons, gold and silver jewelry, a spearhead, ceramics, and utensils were found in the tomb. These discoveries show how ancient cultures developed writing, laying the foundations for modern languages. Terrible child sacrifice. Archaeologists find evidence of human sacrifices in all corners of the globe. But what they saw in northern Peru, near the ancient capital of the Chimu people, Chan, shocked even experienced researchers. The remains of 269 children with cut marks on their sternums and ribs. Who committed this terrible murder and why? In total, in 2 neighboring burial sites, the remains of 269 children aged 5 to 14 and 3 adults will be discovered. All of them died more than 500 years ago during carefully planned sacrifices. Perhaps world history has never seen such rituals before or since. In 2011, the owner of a local pizzeria shared some astonishing news. His children and local dogs started finding human bones sticking out of the sand in a nearby vacant lot. He pleaded with archaeologists to investigate what was going on there. At first, Prieto thought it was just a forgotten cemetery. But after excavating the remains of several children wrapped in shrouds and getting their radiocarbon dates of 1400 to 1450, the archaeologist realized he had stumbled upon a large-scale and terrifying burial site. Reconstructing the events in Huanchaquito is not so easy, mainly because scientists know very little about the Chimu culture. The hardened silt sheds light on the mystery of Huanchaquito in which the victims were buried. The thick layer of silt indicates prolonged heavy rains. The population of Chan was sustained by well-developed irrigation systems and coastal fishing. But the rise in sea temperature and the heavy rains caused by this climatic phenomenon could have undermined both the political and economic foundations of the Chimu Empire. Perhaps the priests and leaders decided to carry out a mass sacrifice in a desperate attempt to beg the gods to stop the flood and famine. Jane Ava Baxter, an anthropologist from DePaul University in Chicago, supports the hypothesis that, in the eyes of the Chimu, children could have been among the most valuable gifts that could be offered to the gods. An ancient house in the Sinai Desert. In Egypt, archaeologists discovered a 3,500-year-old structure in the Sinai Desert, identified as a royal retreat. The ruins of this fortified area were found at the Tel Hab archaeological site. The palace, intended as a retreat for the pharaoh and his close associates, was built from mud brick. It was part of the fortified complexes built near Egypt's eastern gateway to accommodate troops. Dating has shown that the palace was built during the reign of Pharaoh Thutmose III, known for his military campaigns. The kings of ancient Egypt regularly conducted military expeditions to the eastern Mediterranean. The Sinai Desert was one of the routes used by Egyptian troops. The pharaoh's rest house was a strategic facility, the center of the fortress, where the ruler and his troops rested. Here, the warriors regained their strength and replenished their supplies before campaigns. A very rare and unusual item. In the southeast of Germany, archaeologists found what at first glance seemed to be an ordinary woman's burial. They dated it to the year 600 AD. But the item she was buried with was very strange and rare. Scientists from the Bavarian State Office for Monument Protection state that the woman had a high social status. That's understandable since a metal folding chair was found next to her. However, only the frame of the chair, measuring 70 by 45 centimeter when folded, was preserved, and the woman's age was estimated at 4,050 years. Most likely, besides metal, the chair was also made from other materials such as wood and leather. For Germany, this is the first such find, while in Europe it is already the 29th. They had a metal frame. Finding something like this is considered a great gift in the world of archaeology since it is very rare and its meaning is not well understood. To better study the ancient world, we need more patterns and initial data, and for that, archaeologists need to dig and research a lot. In our case, the burial with folding chairs had symbolic meaning in the past. People who held high social status were buried with such gifts, and this mostly concerned men, but here's the catch. In most of the discovered burials, there were women. Besides the chair, archaeologists found a pearl necklace with multicolored glass beads and a belt with brooches, and nearby lay an animal bone, possibly from a cow. Archaeologists could no longer explain what this gift to the afterlife meant. Not far from the female burial, a male burial was also found. The man was buried with a full set of weapons and artifacts that still need to be studied. And what was the tastiest cheese you've ever tried? Write in the comments. Meanwhile, I'll tell you about a cheese that's 2,600 years old. Halloumi cheese that's 2,600 years old. How can you show archaeologists' finds and not talk about ancient Egypt? So, in the Saqqara necropolis, archaeologists discovered a fermented dairy product that we're used to seeing on store shelves today. Halloumi cheese, 2,600 years old, was found in ancient clay vessels. Each vessel had Demotic inscriptions, which is one of the forms of ancient Egyptian writing. Archaeologists studied some of the vessels and confirmed that they contained halloumi. All the vessels were taken to the laboratory, where they will be studied in more detail. I understand that some cheeses become more expensive and tastier with age, but I wouldn't want to try such an expensive cheese. In ancient Egypt, cheese was originally called haram, but nowadays it is called halum or halloumi. There is also another version of the origin of this cheese. Some historians claim that it first appeared during the Byzantine period on the island of Cyprus. This cheese melts at high temperatures, so it is often cooked on the grill. Now from Egypt, we will move to Southeast Asia, where the oldest forest awaits us. The Faceless King. No matter what anyone says, being a king is not an easy job, especially if you are the king of Jerusalem and your country is constantly besieged by Muslims, and your main enemy is the most powerful ruler of that time, Saladin. And if you add to that a terrible disease, leprosy, which doesn't allow you to live a normal life, these are the kinds of sufferings that few could endure. But the hero of our video accepted all these challenges. Modern historians admire his willpower and dedication to his country. The king without a face, the leper king, all of those names refer to King Baldwin IV. Interesting fact, scientists have finally discovered which disease was the very first in human history. The oldest disease, which is also mentioned in the Bible, was leprosy. Now it's called Hansen's disease, and it is completely curable. Although things were different before, at one time it was considered a curse for sins, at another time a sign of divine grace. People suffered from leprosy as far back as the migration from Africa to Europe. Let's get back to the king. Baldwin had to face his main enemy, Sultan Saladin, in the very first year of his reign. The 13-year-old king successfully attacked Damascus, forcing Saladin to come out of Aleppo. 2 years later, the opponents clashed in battles for Damascus and Andujar. Saladin's army outnumbered the forces of the Kingdom of Jerusalem several times over. In addition, Baldwin could only hold the horse's reins with one hand. But this did not prevent the king from crushing his opponent in 1177 at the Battle of Montgesard. Astonished, Saladin told his close companions in frustration, "As long as this boy is in Jerusalem, the city will not fall." At that time, Baldwin was only 16 years old, and his opponent had to negotiate for peace. By the age of 24, Baldwin could no longer walk without support. Because he was unable to blink, his cornea dried out and he went blind. On top of that, he suffered a very dangerous fever, which made his illness worse. Realizing that death was approaching, Baldwin appointed his 6-year-old nephew as his heir. In reality, King Baldwin IV never wore a mask, as shown in various movies. Yes, his face was indeed disfigured by leprosy, but until the last day of his life he continued to govern the kingdom and fend off danger. Saladin took the city 2 years after Baldwin's death. The history of the Kingdom of Jerusalem ended, but the story of ancient Egypt didn't end, and that's what I'll tell you about next. The Arrow of the Unlucky Hunter. Glacier archaeology no longer seems like something new and unique. With the global melting of glaciers, archaeologists have more work to do. It's just that now they have to dress more warmly and head to excavation sites in pretty remote places. Within the framework of glacier archaeology, ancient biological materials such as dung, food, and plant remains and artifacts have been preserved under the ice for a long time. The first and one of the most important ice discoveries was a mummy found in 1991, which was discovered by German tourists in the Ötztal Alps. This discovery is more than 5,000 years old. I have already talked about this mummy in one of my previous videos. On September 1st this year, archaeologists discovered an ancient arrow estimated to be 800–900 years old. Upon closer examination, archaeologists discovered that the arrow is broken on one side, and the ancient hunter tried to repair it. But most likely the hunter was unsuccessful, since he was never able to use the arrow again. Scientists, upon detailed examination, noticed that this arrow had never penetrated any living organism. Besides the arrow, archaeologists also found textile remnants whose purpose remains unknown. There is a suggestion that these could have been pieces from a larger fabric, possibly his clothing or a bag. It might be linen or cotton. Interestingly, until 1813, there was a ban on cotton imports in Norway, and the fabric pieces found are much older than that. Most likely the owner of the arrow was a traveler and came to Norway from warmer countries. The tomb of a royal scribe. In Abu Shir, Egypt, Czech Egyptologists made an important discovery. They found the tomb of a young royal scribe, which is about 2,500 years old. This find, along with other archaeological discoveries in the region, gives scientists a better understanding of the changes that took place in Egypt in the 5th to 6th centuries BC. The tomb belonged to a man named Jehutimkhat, who lived during the time of the Persian invasion of Egypt. Only the underground shaft of the tomb has been preserved, at the bottom of which, at a depth of 14 meters, there is a burial chamber built from limestone blocks. Inside there is a stone sarcophagus with relief decorations, hieroglyphs, and images of ancient Egyptian gods. According to Vladislav Barish from the Czech Institute of Egyptology, the burial chamber is decorated in the traditional style of that time for important people, although Jehutimkhat himself was only a mid-ranking official. The inscriptions on the walls were meant to ease his journey to the afterlife and ensure eternal bliss. They mainly contained religious texts, the names of his parents, and specific phrases, including spells for protection against snakes. However, despite the magical texts, Jehutimkhat's tomb was almost empty when it was opened, as it had been looted around the 5th century AD. The era when the tomb was built was a time of decline in civilization and social upheaval. The study of the remains showed that Jehutimkhat died at about 25 years old and already had signs of severe osteoporosis and spinal wear, possibly due to an underlying illness. The composition of the ritual cocktail. For the first time, scientists were able to study organic remains inside an ancient vessel that is 2,000 years old. The study showed that the ancient Egyptians consumed a special ritual cocktail that included fruits, nuts, alcohol, biological fluids, and psychoactive substances. The vessel, known as the Bezmug, was studied using innovative technology developed by scientists from the University of South Florida, in collaboration with colleagues from Italy. This is the first time that the complete chemical composition of a ritual drink has been identified, including its psychoactive and medicinal components. The Bezmugs were dedicated to the Egyptian god of the same name, the patron of fertility, healing, and protection. He was depicted with a crown of feathers, large eyes, and a tail. Such vessels were used from the 16th century BC to the 5th century AD, and the specimen being studied dates back to the Ptolemaic period. Analysis revealed traces of honey, grapes, sesame, pine nuts, licorice, and hallucinogenic components. Scientists suggest that the mixture was used in magical rituals. People were looking for confirmation of a successful pregnancy, since in ancient times it was considered a dangerous and unpredictable process. Such a cocktail probably caused visions, helping to establish a connection with the deity. Caligula's ships. The ships of Emperor Caligula, built in the 1st century AD, were not intended for naval battles or voyages. These were magnificent pleasure houses decorated with gold and precious stones. The largest ships of antiquity sailed on a small mountain lake and sank under unclear circumstances. The master of pleasures, Gaius Julius Caesar Augustus Germanicus, a man better known in history by his nickname Caligula, Little Boot. Caligula ruled the Roman Empire from 37 to 41 AD, and in just 4 years of power, he was remembered by posterity as one of the most notorious rulers of the great state. As if trying to test the limits of human capability and put the empire's budget to the test, the monarch carried out unpleasant and costly projects. The enormous ships launched on Lake Nemi, a volcanic caldera lake, became one of these fantastic creations. We're talking about 2 oared galleys. One of them served as a temple to the goddess of the forest, Diana, while the other was presumably a pleasure palace. The largest ship reached 73 meters in length and 24 meters in width. The smaller vessel, 70 meters long and 20 meters wide, was not equipped with oars. It was towed. For comparison, the British steamship Titanic, famous as the largest vessel of the early 19th century, reached 270 meters in length and 28 meters in width. Caligula's galleys were smaller than the Titanic and sailed on a lake less than 1,000 meters wide. For their time, these were giants splashing around in a puddle. But what was striking was something else. The ships had blooming gardens with fruit trees branching out, flowers giving off fragrance, and grapevines hanging down. There were also baths and pools right there, a revolving stage and palaces with rooms for slaves and guests. The amenities included plumbing with hot and cold water, as well as heated floors. Of course, all the furnishings were artfully decorated with the heads of wild animals, patterns, and precious metals. The oars sparkled with gemstones. The roofs of the palace and the temple gleamed gold in the sunlight, stood on marble columns, and covered a mosaic floor of stunning beauty. Here and there stood statues and bas-reliefs, and paintings adorned the walls. The centerpiece, both beautiful and functional, was the stage, which consisted of rotating platforms. Their design used a ball-bearing system, which was only reinvented at the end of the 19th century. And all this magnificence existed for 2,000 years. We can only guess and envy what kind of celebrations Caligula threw there. The hulls of the ships, which were remarkably well preserved at the bottom of the lake, thanks to the thoroughness of the ancient Romans, were put on display in a museum. The museum was destroyed in 1944. Some say it was the Germans, others say the Americans. Historians disagree. However, not everything is lost. According to researchers, it is most likely that another ship, measuring 122 meters in length, still rests at the bottom of the lake. It seems the main sensations are still ahead of us. Why did the ancient bear love caves so much? There are many documentaries and cartoons about bears. The bear was the symbol of the 1980 Olympics. It was the emblem of many cities, and there are legends about its strength. In ancient times, there lived a bear on our planet that surpassed all those living today combined. This giant reached 3.5 meters in height, and it was called the cave bear. However, it's not exactly clear whether it actually lived in caves or not. About 300,000 years ago, the cave bear appeared in territories from Ireland and England to western Siberia. It is a close relative of the brown bear. It's not hard to guess that it got its name because its remains were found in caves, but we can't say for sure that it lived there all the time. Most likely the bears went into caves to spend the night, so we should actually call modern bears den bears. To feed such a giant, bears would have had to eat cattle, but that's not the case either. Bears are mostly vegetarians and mainly eat berries, roots, insects, and plants. When bears entered the steppe, it was difficult for them to survive on just plants, so they ate everything they could find along the way. When their fat reserves were full, they would look for a suitable cave and go into hibernation. But that's where danger awaited the giants. No matter how huge you are, when you're asleep, you're vulnerable, and cave lions took advantage of that. Sometimes bears managed to hide from the lions, but then they had another enemy, our ancestors. People specifically looked for sleeping bears to kill them. They used the bear's fur for clothing, the meat for food, and the cave as shelter. But even that wasn't enough for people. Based on killing bears, they invented various magical rituals and used bear skulls as artifacts of power. About 15,000 years ago, the last cave bear was killed by Homo sapiens, as evidenced by the most recent discoveries of ancient giant remains. But the oldest fossilized heart ever discovered is 380 million years old, and I will tell you about it. A jar of cream and worn women's panties. At Tabard Square in London, archaeologists found an intriguing set of artifacts. A jar of cream and women's panties were lying at the bottom of a ditch. It might seem like nothing unusual, since any girl could have dropped such things from her purse. But the girl dropped this set not yesterday, not last year, and not even 100 years ago. These artifacts are more than 2,000 years old, in the 120s to 150s of the ancient Roman era. At that time, there was a small ancient Roman town called Londinium here, and now there is a huge modern metropolis in its place. The archaeologists immediately opened the jar and saw white cream inside with a fingerprint on it, as if someone had used this cream just yesterday. After analyzing the contents, they were able to determine the composition. It was animal fat, starch, and tin, and there were no scents of lavender or chocolate. 2,000 years ago, a cream like this was used to moisturize the skin of the face and hands. It's very interesting to wonder what brand of cosmetics an ancient Roman lady used back then. But the second find is even more interesting. These are women's panties that look very similar to modern bikinis or thongs. Could it really be that more than 2,000 years ago, ladies preferred such underwear? This set was found in 1953 at the bottom of an ancient well. As I said earlier, they date back to the 1st century AD. Most likely some of you are very familiar with the history of ancient Rome, and you know very well that according to the philosophy of those times, no one wore underwear. And you would be right, such underwear was not used every day. Girls wore it while performing various gymnastic exercises. This is confirmed by the mosaic at the Villa Romana del Casale in Sicily. To perform complex acrobatic tricks, girls needed at least minimal clothing. Besides performances, women in ancient Rome used such panties during their periods, placing pieces of folded cloth or wool inside. Here is another example of an ancient Roman mosaic. A giant gladiator from the Villa Borghese, Rome, 3rd century AD. Have you ever wondered what a Roman battlefield sounded like? A giant complex of ancient settlements. Using modern technology, archaeologists from University College Dublin, together with their Serbian and Slavic colleagues, made a significant discovery. They discovered many previously unknown Bronze Age settlements in the southern part of the Carpathian Basin near Serbia. Analysis of satellite images and aerial photography made it possible to reconstruct the ancient landscape and discover a network of megaforts, huge prehistoric structures. These megaforts, previously known from examples such as Gradishta and Josh, Chanatpalota, Santana and Carnește, and Arcuri, were once considered isolated. However, new research has shown that they actually form a complex network. At the height of their development, tens of thousands of people could have lived here. These sites, located along the Tisa River, were discovered in an area where almost all settlements are within 5 kilometers of each other. Scientists believe that local communities interacted peacefully with each other and were important centers in Europe during the era of the Mycenaeans, Hittites, and New Kingdom Egyptians. The Egtved girl is a famous mummy from Denmark who was buried in a well-preserved coffin discovered in 1921. Although the coffin made from a tree trunk was well preserved, only her clothes, hair, nails, and some teeth were in good condition. Also, inside her coffin were the cremated remains of a child who was about 5 or 6 years old. Historians believe that the young lady was a priestess of the Scandinavian sun cult because of the spiral symbols on her belt. Later studies showed that the girl was not from Denmark, but from the Black Forest in Germany. It is believed that she may have married a chieftain in Denmark to form a strategic. The royal tomb in Peru. This time we are heading to South America, where treasure hunters from all over the world have been looting ancient burial sites in Peru for decades. Fortunately, they missed a huge royal tomb that belonged to a little-studied civilization. Hidden under a layer of sand, this tomb remained concealed from looters for over 1,000 years. In the place called El Castillo de Warmay, Professor Miloš Gersh saw in his lifetime so many terrifying things that no one else has ever encountered, nowhere else on our planet. Here, the remains of ancient insects that fed on human flesh were discovered, as well as snakes coiled at the bottom of ceramic vessels. And during one of the expeditions, a swarm of giant bees attacked the archaeologists. It sounds like something out of a movie, but this is exactly what the work of archaeologists looks like in the impenetrable jungle. And all this is so that we can study the ancient world. For more than 100 years, tomb raiders have hoped to find a tomb with mummies wrapped in precious fabrics and jewelry. Miloš Gersh believed that in El Castillo he would be able to find that very mysterious tomb, although most people around him tried to dissuade him from this expedition. He believed that about 1,000 years ago, some important event from that era took place here. Many artifacts of the Peruvian Wari civilization have been found in these areas. Thanks to a drone, the group of researchers was able to see the outlines of walls on the hill. It turned out that this was just the beginning of a great expedition. Underground, there was a giant labyrinth of high walls and towers. The archaeologists even managed to determine that the walls were painted bright red. Underground, they managed to discover a royal tomb with 4 queens and more than 50 remains of noble individuals. Copper axes, silver bowls, and gold jewelry were what looters were after. And only Miloš Gersh was able to find this in the tomb at El Castillo. In ancient times, it was believed that a person's status was important not only during life but also after death. That's why the burials of important people were so lavish. From the little information we know about the Wari civilization, we know that women were skilled craftswomen and made fabrics that were better than those of Flemish and Dutch weavers of the 16th century. Traces of opium dating back 3,500 years. Archaeologists in Israel made a sensational statement. Bronze Age people who lived in the Levant used psychoactive substances. In 2017, during excavations in the tombs of Tel Yehud, archaeologists unearthed clay pottery, but the analysis was only conducted this year. The study of such excavations is very similar to forensic examination at a crime scene. The analysis of 22 clay items was carried out using equipment that is used by the police. People who used opium in the Bronze Age could never have imagined that they would be studied by 21st century police officers. Gas chromatography and mass spectrometry conducted as part of the study showed that 8 of the vessels contained opium alkaloids derived from the poppy plant. The vessels contained morphinin, which is derived from morphine, as well as opianic acid and other compounds found in the chemical signature of opium. Based on this, we can conclude that the ancient Canaanites were familiar with the psychoactive properties of the poppy. The ancient Egyptians may have used opium as an offering to the afterlife. Many used it to summon the spirit of deceased relatives. As early as the 1960s, experts first suggested that similar jars were used to produce opium. Their long necks resembled an upside-down poppy head. The first written mention of opium was found on 3,000-year-old Sumerian clay tablets, where the drug is referred to as gil, which means happiness. This is far from the first discovery confirming that people used drugs in ancient times. Archaeologists have repeatedly found traces of marijuana, which was most likely used for religious rituals. Helped with swallowing, breathing, and speaking. Polish archaeologists have discovered a unique medical prosthesis designed for a person with a cleft palate, which is about 300 years old. This defect occurs when the roof of the mouth does not close properly during development, and nowadays it can be corrected surgically. However, 3 centuries ago, doctors had to look for other solutions. The prosthesis was found in the Church of St. Francis of Assisi in Krakow, and is the first of its kind discovered in Poland. It was probably custom-made for a specific person with a cleft palate to make his life more comfortable. The device was inserted into the mouth and filled the gap in the palate, performing functions necessary for a normal life. The uniqueness of this prosthesis lies in its design. It consists of two parts, a metal plate that serves as the hard palate, and a woolen pad to fit snugly in the mouth. The hard palate helps with swallowing, breathing, and speaking, and also holds objects in the mouth, preventing them from entering the nasal cavity. This small device, about 3 cm long and weighing only 6 grams, was quite advanced for its time. For a more detailed study of the prosthesis, scientists used a special microscope and X-ray analysis. They found that the metal parts were made of copper with traces of teeth, gold, and silver. The woolen pad contained traces of silver iodide, probably to protect against microbes and maintain cleanliness. Hidden essence. This unique clay figure belonging to the Maya culture was found in the Petén region of Guatemala and dates back to the Classic period. The depicted person is sitting in a pose of deep contemplation or a ritual gesture with open palms, symbolizing offerings or appeals to the gods. He is wearing a mask on his head which brings to mind modern helmets or even spacesuits, making this artifact the subject of much speculation. The mask could have symbolized a connection with the other world or served as part of a ceremonial costume intended to imitate gods or spirits. However, in its unusual features, some researchers see references to contact with extraterrestrial civilizations. Maya legends often mention celestial beings who brought knowledge from other worlds, and such iconography could be a symbolic representation of these legends. The figure also features decorations, a massive medallion, and bracelets, which indicate the high status of the person depicted. It is possible that this was a figure of a priest or shaman performing an important ritual role. The oldest heart. A new archaeological find has come to us from Australia, although in the past it could have swum to us. We are talking about the oldest fossilized heart of a living creature ever found. This is the heart of a fish, and it is 380 million years old. Previously, scientists could study ancient organ anatomy only from skeletal remains, since the soft tissues of fossil animals almost never survived to the present day. This time, scientists were very lucky. The heart belonged to an armored fish, one of the arthrodires. These creatures lived on our planet between 420 and 360 million years ago. They were among the first vertebrate animals to develop jaws. Scientists also found the stomach, intestines, and liver of the ancient fish, along with its heart. The most interesting thing is that all the organs were in their original positions, and over hundreds of millions of years were not crushed by heavy rocks. Discovering the organs of the fish in their original state is nothing short of a miracle for the scientific world. This helped scientists see how evolution took place and what the anatomy of fish looked like about 400 million years ago, as if they were studying a freshly caught fish. Based on the discovered fossils, they created the first 3D model of an arthrodire heart. The researchers stated that the anatomy of ancient fish was not very different from that of humans. And if you have, let's say, $25 million, you can buy yourself the skeleton of a very ancient creature. Sounds of a Roman battlefield. In the ancient Roman fort of Vindolanda, a mouthpiece of an ancient Roman horn was discovered. The metal horn was a musical instrument that was used to transmit orders to the troops during the battle. No fewer than 9 Roman forts were built from wood or stone in Vindolanda from around 85 to 370 AD, creating one of the most complex archaeological sites in Britain and a unique cultural heritage of frontier life. Today, Vindolanda is an active archaeological site where excavations have previously uncovered thousands of well-preserved shoes, textiles, wooden objects, and the Vindolanda tablets. These are the oldest surviving documents in Great Britain, dating from the 1st and 2nd centuries AD. Researchers were excavating the floor of Hadrian's workshop, buried beneath the remains of the officers' club hall, when they discovered a rare mouthpiece made of copper alloy, dating to around AD 120-128. Barbara Burley, curator of the Vindolanda Trust, said, "When you find a part of a musical instrument, it helps us get a more accurate idea not only of what the army looked like, but also what it sounded like. And now we will go to China, and let's see what the burial costumes looked like." The burial of a vampire woman. In the practice of archaeologists, deviant burials are sometimes encountered. They stand out because the burial rite for the deceased differed from what was generally accepted in that culture. Such people could be buried outside the cemetery or deprived of certain body parts. The appearance of deviant burials could be influenced by many reasons, related both to the belief system and to the circumstances of life in
Смерти людей, погребенных в необычной манере.
One of the categories of non-standard burials is the graves of so-called vampires. Archaeologists believe that such burials contain the remains of people who were feared by those around them. They were afraid that the deceased would rise from their graves. To prevent this from happening, stones were placed in the mouths of the dead, they were mutilated and even nailed to the ground. In addition, it was common to place sickles and scythes on the neck or abdomen. People were labeled vampires for unusual looks, practicing witchcraft, suicide, or being early epidemic victims. Polish archaeologists from Nicolaus Copernicus University in Toruń, led by Professor Dariusz Poliński, conducted excavations near the town of Bydgoszcz, where from 2005 to 2009, an early medieval necropolis was studied, with valuable artifacts found in the burials. However, this year, the scientists focused their attention on a nearby 17th century burial complex that had been damaged as a result of agricultural work. In one of the burials, the archaeologists discovered the remains of a female vampire. There was an iron sickle lying across her neck, and a padlock was attached to the big toe of her left foot. At the same time, remnants of a silk headdress were preserved on this woman's skull, which may indicate her rather high status, since in the 17th century, this was a very expensive item. It is possible that the reason the local residents buried her in such an unusual way lies in the woman's unconventional appearance. Her front tooth protruded forward. An ancient time capsule. Jane Eastman, an experienced treasure hunter, recently made an unusual discovery at the bottom of the Wanglia River. She found a Victorian-era glass bottle filled with pickles. Jane showed this amazing treasure to her followers on Instagram, where her discovery sparked a lively discussion. The bottle, made of green-tinted glass, was preserved in excellent condition, and its lid with the inscription WND Harvest Doughgate stood out. Doc London encouraged Jane to study its history. She found out that the WND Harvest Company had been selling spices and pickles in London since the 1870s, and the bottle she found probably dates back to the period between the 1890s and 1910s. According to Jane, the bottle turned out to be completely airtight, which is why the pickles were preserved. The woman called it a real-time capsule and decided not to open the find in order to preserve it in its original state. To do this, she sealed the lid with wax. Pickling jars were popular in the Victorian era because of their practicality. The only thing that is still unclear is whether the pickles have remained edible. 100,000 ancient coins. In Maebashi, Japan, archaeologists discovered a unique find of over 100,000 ancient coins, including Chinese Banlian coins, dated to 175 BC. These coins, found during the construction of a factory, date from the 7th to the 13th centuries. They were tied in bundles of 100 pieces using straw sashi ropes. This site, located near the ruins of the Qin Dynasty Palace, was likely chosen to hide the treasure because of an approaching war. A total of 1,060 sashi bundles were found, some of which contained up to 1,000 coins. An analysis of 334 coins from the hoard revealed 44 different types of currency, covering the period from the Western Han Dynasty to the Southern Song Dynasty. The coins are 2.3 centimeters in diameter, with a square hole in the center and a thickness of 1 millimeter. The latest coin dates back to 1265, indicating that the hoard was hidden during the Kamakura period. Drawings of eerie people with huge heads. Now we are heading to central Tanzania, where ancient artists left us strange drawings in a cave. In the Swego Game Reserve, archaeologists found a uniquely painted rock. There, researchers found remnants of drawings, some of which have disappeared without a trace, but one drawing has been preserved quite well, although it raises many questions. In the Amahi cave, drawings of humanoid figures with large heads were discovered. According to archaeologists, this cave is several hundred years old, but it is difficult to determine exactly when these drawings appeared here. Researchers believe that these are buffalo heads. Buffaloes were an important part of Sandawa culture. However, there were no people with buffalo heads in their history, although the horns of these figures definitely resemble those of buffaloes. Not far from this place, archaeologists found two more similar drawings of creepy humanoid creatures with huge heads. They all look very much alike. So far, archaeologists cannot give a definite answer as to whom the ancient artists were trying to depict. However, scientists have found a small clue. In the Kendoa region, where the drawings were found, the Sandawa people live. They use various drawings for their rituals. Perhaps they will help archaeologists explain the origin of these drawings. From Tanzania, we will head to the Middle East, to another cave where the discoveries are no less impressive. Han Dynasty burial suits. In ancient China, high-ranking people were buried in unique suits made of jade plaques fastened with gold wire. The cold, smooth plates created an incredibly beautiful mosaic that symbolized the wealth of the Han Dynasty. Such burials have not been found anywhere else except in China. In Chinese, they are called pinyin, which means jade suit. For centuries, people thought that jade burial suits were nothing more than a legend. People could not even imagine that rulers in those times could be so wealthy as to cover their entire bodies with incredibly expensive jade. But the discovery in 1986 confirmed that these were not just legends described in old texts. This discovery became a sensation not only for China, but for the whole world. At last, archaeologists managed to confirm that the rulers of the Han Dynasty were buried in jade suits. The Han Dynasty was extremely powerful and ruled from 206 BC to 220 AD. It is one of the most iconic Chinese dynasties, and today the Han people remain the main ethnic group of China. The tombs of the Han Dynasty rulers changed the understanding of Chinese burial practices. In 1983 in Dingxian, Hebei province, researchers discovered one of the most expensive jade suits in history, which belonged to the ruler Huai. The suit is made of 1,203 pieces of jade, connected by gold threads, with a total weight for the entire dynasty of grams. The most complex suit consisted of 2,498 pieces of jade. Mythical creatures in the basement. It's 2006 in England. A team of workers is planning to demolish a house. It was just an ordinary day. The workers had no idea what surprise awaited them during their work. When they went down to the basement, the workers discovered something. In the basement, they found hundreds of cardboard boxes. Excited, they thought that the boxes contained very old aged wine. But if there had been wine in the boxes, this video would have been released on a different channel. They opened the boxes and saw mummies inside. These were not mummies of people or even animals. These were strange mummies of some mythical creatures. Hundreds of mummies, different fairies, and gnomes. They got very scared and decided to check who originally owned this mansion. The first owner of the house was named Thomas Theodore Merlin. Believe it or not, but this man lived to be 160 years old, and he always looked younger than his peers. Those who knew him personally said that at 80 years old, he looked like he was 40. There were many legends about this man, and it was believed that he invented the elixir of eternal youth. But as I said earlier, he only lived to be 160. This unique individual was born in the north of England in the city of Hellingshire in 1782. In the 19th century, Thomas Theodore Merlin traveled around the country showcasing his unique collection of mythical creatures. It was called Merlin's Cryptid Collection. Unfortunately, in those days, his tour was not successful, and many considered him a fraud. Personally, I think that nowadays he would have many more fans. It feels like people these days believe in much crazier things. Thomas wrote about his failures and achievements in a diary, which was found next to the mummies. The cause of death is still unknown. Bronze Age wooden well. Archaeologists recently discovered a well-preserved Bronze Age wooden well in Oxfordshire, England. The well was found during the construction of Benson Relief Road. John Boutroyd, senior project manager, said that they expected to find an ordinary pit, but came across a preserved wooden post driven vertically into the ground. Further excavations showed that the posts were part of a wooden well. The moist soil contributed to the excellent preservation of the wood. The archaeologists documented the structure digitally and carefully dismantled it for transport to the Oxfordshire Museum Service. Samples of the wood were sent for analysis to determine its type. In addition to the well, the archaeologists found flint, animal bones, and fragments of pottery, indicating their use for storage and waste. Despite the challenging conditions, the team successfully documented the well. Soil samples will help create a more complete picture of the surrounding landscape and the scale of the settlement. A Tyrannosaurus skeleton at auction? If you're a big fan of archaeology and prehistoric creatures, love studying the ancient world and telling your friends about it, and if you have at least $25 million, you can buy a 12-meter Tyrannosaurus Rex skeleton named Shen at an auction in Hong Kong. This skeleton was discovered in the United States in 2020 in Macomb County, Montana. This creature is about 68 to 66 million years old, and it took 2 years to assemble the complete skeleton of the giant. The auction will take place this year on November 30, and if you want to buy it, you should hurry. But most likely you won't make it in time because a potential buyer has already been found. The potential buyer is a multimillionaire who plans to place the Tyrannosaurus skeleton in his mansion. And let me remind you that its length is 12.2 meters, its height is 4.6 meters, and this giant weighs almost 1.5 tons. Currently, the skeleton belongs to a private collector, but soon the skeleton will go to its new owner. Tyrannosaurus Rex is one of the deadliest dinosaurs on the planet. It had the strongest bite in history, and at the same time it was quite developed. This is the only complete skeleton out of 80 million Tyrannosaurus that has survived to this day, and it's the second skeleton to be put up for auction. Mosaics on the shore of the Sea of Galilee, and once again we return to Israel, where archaeologists have discovered floor mosaics on the shore of the Sea of Galilee. This indicates that in ancient times this place was a prosperous region inhabited by early Christian Jewish communities, and later it became an important Islamic administrative center. At one time, this place was an important trading center focused on sugar production. And the son of the caliph commissioned a palace that included one of the first mosques built in the region of Palestine. This area was hit by a major earthquake around 749 AD and was later abandoned. Professor Kunin and his team have been conducting archaeological research in this area for the past decade, starting with excavations and restoration work at the caliph's palace. The work has been plagued. The work was suspended during the pandemic, but this year the team resumed excavations at the site. Lady Rai is one of the oldest known mummies discovered in Egypt. She was discovered in 1881, and researchers estimate that she was about 3,040 years old, when she died around 1,530 BC. From the writings left about Lady Rai, we know that she was the nurse of Queen Ahmose Nefertari, the first queen of the 18th dynasty. The mummified body of Ahmose-Enhepe, the aunt of Ahmose Nefertari, was found in the outer coffin of Lady Rai. In 2009, researchers performed a CT scan of Lady Rai's body and discovered that she had atherosclerosis. She is the oldest known mummy with this disease, and several other Egyptian mummies also show signs of atherosclerosis. A woman was buried with an infant in her arms. In the area of the city of Nieuwijn, Netherlands, archaeologists discovered numerous sites of the Neolithic Swifterband culture. Ancient cattle breeders settled along riverbanks in the territory of modern-day Netherlands between 5,300 and 3,400 BC. About 136,000 artifacts of this culture were discovered by specialists under a 2-meter layer of peat and clay in the Het Cluster Business Park. During the excavation, archaeologists discovered 4 skeletons and extracted them together with the surrounding deposits as a single block, and they were delivered to the Leiden Archaeological Laboratory for research. One of the skeletons belonged to a young woman, 20 to 30 years old, who died about 6,000 years ago. Initially, specialists considered the burial to be a single one. The position of the skeleton seemed strange. The right arm was bent at a 90-degree angle, which is unusual for burials of this culture. Only after a thorough analysis did specialists discover a tiny infant skeleton near the arm. Clavicles, skull, long bones, and a jaw with baby teeth. Judging by the development of the teeth, the child was about 3 months old at the time of death. The find turned out to be the oldest child burial in the Netherlands. In the grave itself, apart from the bones, there are no artifacts, but nearby pieces of deer antlers and clay pots were found. DNA analysis conducted in 2019 showed that the child was a girl and the woman turned out to be the mother of the infant. A chest of gold in concrete. During renovations at one of the villas in Vienna, workers discovered an incredible treasure. Under the concrete floor of the basement, they found a chest with 30 kilograms of Mozart gold coins. Their value is estimated at 2.3 million euros. The mysterious cord sticking out of the concrete was first noticed by a construction worker, but he decided not to touch it. Later, a plumber arrived at the site and, intrigued by the discovery, dug up the metal box. Now, according to Austrian law, he is entitled to a third of the treasure, or possibly even half, since the rest will go to the homeowner. The gold was hidden in concrete before World War II. For the plumber, this turned out to be a real stroke of luck, but for the builder who missed the chance, it was clearly unfortunate. An ancient refrigerator. I'll start my story about archaeological finds with Bulgaria, where at the Roman legionary camp in Nove, archaeologists found a unique container made of ceramic plates, which was most likely used as a refrigerator. This camp was built in the 1st century AD. The territory of the ancient camp was studied by Bulgarian and Polish archaeologists for decades. This year, under the guidance of Professor Petr Dicik, they managed to discover a refrigerator that was located in the military barracks. The legionaries used it to store leftover food. Similar refrigerators have been found before, but they are still considered rare. In addition to the refrigerator, archaeologists found dozens of coins. But the next find, discovered at a garbage dump in Poland, will definitely surprise you. A cave from the time of Pharaoh Ramses II. It's rare for archaeologists to come across places that have remained untouched for thousands of years. This time, in the Palmachim National Park in Israel, a group of researchers discovered an ancient burial site. During excavation work, a digger collapsed the roof of a burial cave, inside which dozens of artifacts from the time of Pharaoh Ramses II were found. The last time people were here was 3,300 years ago. Archaeologists discovered dozens of fragments of clay and bronze jugs and bowls of various shapes. Some of the vessels contained precious substances. In addition to the pottery, a weapon of war was found in the form of an arrowhead replica. All of this was meant to serve the dead in the afterlife. According to archaeologists, such a discovery happens once in a lifetime. This isn't an Indiana Jones movie, this is real life. A real tomb straight from the ancient world. It's a time capsule. No human hand has touched these vessels and weapons for more than 3,300 years. Usually in those times, warriors were buried with weapons, and the burial chamber was manually carved into the rock in the shape of a square. It may have been the burial place of an entire family or clan. Unfortunately, the condition of the remains was so terrible that scientists won't even be able to extract DNA for analysis. But scientists will be able to study ancient cosmetics and women's underwear that were discovered in London. The sensational discovery of a skull with strange symbols was presented to the public by Mexican researcher Pablo Enrique Garcia Sanchez. He stated that not only humans lived on Earth, and as proof, he showed a certain skull. However, this discovery raises many questions. About 4 years ago, miners near the city of Taxco approached Pablo Garcia. They stated that at a depth of 3,035 meters, they began to find very strange objects. The collection of artifacts surprised even the researcher. The miners brought to the surface beads made of various semi-precious stones, a jade blade, and various amulets and talismans made of bone. These discoveries amazed the archaeologist, and he appealed to the government with a request to conduct excavations in the mine and temporarily close it. After receiving permission, he immediately began the excavations. He managed to discover more than 100 household items, ritual tools, and ornaments. But what was unique about all this was something else. Almost every item had inscriptions in a language unknown to anyone. And at the beginning of this year, a group of archaeologists led by our protagonist found an unusual skull. The scientists immediately conducted a thorough analysis of the object. Dating showed that it was more than 16,000 years old. The skull had inscriptions similar to those on the artifacts discovered earlier. DNA analysis revealed 4 strands instead of 3. Pablo Garcia believes this skull is divine. He is convinced that the gods of the ancient peoples of the Americas visited our planet tens of thousands of years ago, and this skull belonged to one of the ancient deities. But he believes that the rest of the items were made by ordinary people. Last year, at this very spot, archaeologists found a 4-fingered mummy of a creature that looked like a dog. Pablo was unable to conduct a DNA analysis. Of course, most scientists in Mexico did not believe Pablo Enrique and consider him a charlatan. However, some scientists claimed that this is a real sensation, which 100% confirms the existence of ancient paleocontacts. And what do you think? How real are the skull and artifacts found in the mine? Weapons older than 400,000 years. In Iran, archaeologists, together with their colleagues from France, discovered unique artifacts in the Calicourt cave that are more than 400,000 years old. They also discovered traces of ancient humans, whose age they determined using electron spin resonance, since it was not possible to date the traces using the classical radiocarbon method. The huge number of stone tools in this cave gave scientists the opportunity to reconstruct the chronology of human presence at this site. Archaeologists suggested that the last inhabitant of this cave was a Neanderthal, and before him, Homo erectus and Heidelberg man lived here. At the moment, this cave is considered the oldest settlement on our planet. How many more such places we have yet to find, possibly even older than this cave? And the next discovery, although much newer, is very unusual. The rising Telamon. This unique Telamon from the Temple of Zeus in the ancient city of Agrigento in Sicily is one of the most impressive examples of monumental sculpture from the 5th century BC. The temple, built in the Doric style, was considered one of the largest temples of the ancient world, and its architecture reflected the power of Greek civilization. The telamons, which served as supports, had symbolic significance, representing titanic strength holding up the sky or the immense weight of the architectural structure. These giant statues, about 7.5 meters tall, were impressive, both in their detail and their size. One of the telamons was restored and placed in its original location, demonstrating the complexity of the engineering and artistic solutions of the ancient masters. However, myths and mysteries still surround the telamon. Some researchers believe that the images of the Titans could reflect ancient myths about the confrontation between gods and giants, and their position in the temple could symbolize their subjugation. Others believe that such large forms could have been used as images of extraterrestrial beings that the ancient inhabitants believed in. X-ray of ancient mummies, 2015 Pachacamac Archaeological Site in Peru. 200 mummified remains were discovered. Most of them were wrapped in several layers of cloth. And to prevent the mummies from being destroyed when trying to unwrap them, modern technology had to be used. Canadian scientists from the University of Western Ontario scanned the ancient mummies using a mobile X-ray unit. They were dated to 1100 and 1470 AD. In 6 days, anthropologists took about 900 X-ray images and performed more than 30 CT scans. Later, using specialized computer programs, all the photographs were combined into a digital image. This way, it became clear that not all the mummies were well preserved, and some of the scans held surprises. Inside the heads of the mummies, there were mysterious objects whose purpose is still unknown. One of the artifacts looked like a bent disc, and archaeologists nicknamed it Taco. In one mummy's eye socket, they found a sharp object, and in another, they noticed a tattoo on the hand. One mummy was completely covered in cotton seeds. Scientists have not yet been able to explain the reason for this. They suggested that it was done for ritual purposes. In the fabrics that the mummies were wrapped in, scientists found small shells, stones, and unidentified artifacts. Despite such a huge number of mummies in one place, archaeologists still have the main question. Was the mummification procedure carried out intentionally, or is it the result of the dry climate and burial in the sands that helped the mummies survive to this day? An ancient forest with the tallest trees. Dipterocarps are the dominant group of trees in the tropical forests of Kalimantan, which have been present on the island for at least 4 million years. It is the third largest island in the world, the only island divided between 3 countries, Indonesia, Malaysia, and Brunei. Researchers are sounding the alarm. This forest is on the verge of extinction, and humanity could lose its history, which spans 4 million years. Researchers studied leaf fossils and stated that the modern landscape of Kalimantan existed during the Pliocene era. The island is home to 270 species of Dipterocarps, which is half of the total number of species on the planet. This type of tree is one of the tallest tropical trees in the world. Some of them can reach heights of over 100 meters. It's very difficult to find fossilized leaves in dense jungles. Previously, research was based on fossilized pollen, but pollen decomposes quickly, and the analyses were inaccurate. Now, archaeologists need to hurry to collect as many fossilized remains of these ancient giants as possible before humanity destroys the mangrove forests in this region. Have you ever wondered why ancient bears lived in caves? Keep watching, and I'll try to answer that question as well. A 1,000-year-old Maya settlement. Archaeologists have discovered a mysteriously ancient Maya settlement in a Mennonite farming community. The ruined dwellings looked like white mounds. Scientists studied the pottery found in these places and dated it between 250 and 600 AD. As is well known, this period went down in history for its large-scale construction and urbanization. At that time, the Maya had a well-developed artistic culture. The buildings have plastered floors and a collection of household vessels for cooking. And in some buildings, archaeologists found agricultural tools made of flint. The Maya had well-developed agriculture, and they used the forest to raise animals in their natural environment. This is indicated by the large accumulation of bones in this area. One of the structures resembled an ancient temple, completely plastered with white limestone. And the flint artifacts found there were most likely used for ceremonies.
подношений.
The tusk of a straight-tusked elephant. 2 years ago in Germany, between Hanover and Leipzig, archaeologists discovered a bone of a straight-tusked elephant. It was a huge cervical vertebra. Later, archaeologists discovered other bones of this animal as well. Finding a complete skeleton of a 4-meter elephant is a great rarity. After numerous studies, scientists determined that this elephant was eaten by ancient people, but it died of natural causes, since it was about 50 years old, and it was found near an ancient lake where elephants used to go to drink water. And just this year in September in Israel, biologist Repatriations found a well-preserved tusk of a straight-tusked elephant. Its length is 2.6 meters and 20 centimeters in diameter. The tusk has not been fully extracted yet, so it is still impossible to determine the exact species of the elephant. But, as you know, archaeologists like to rush and draw their conclusions ahead of time. According to them, this is a straight-tusked forest elephant. Our friends often hunted it, and in certain regions, elephants of this species were the main source of meat. Their height exceeded 4 meters, and their weight reached as much as 1.5 tons. As you can imagine, the meat from such an elephant could feed a very large family. We no longer need to hunt elephants and cave bears. You can only watch this on your screens. The oldest natural mummy on the planet. The mummy was found in Spirit Cave in Nevada in 1940. Interestingly, the person died more than 10,600 years ago, and his mummy is perfectly preserved. Interestingly, the body was wrapped in a sheet and a mat made of reeds, and the deceased still had moccasins on his feet. Early analyses showed that the remains belonged to a man who died at the age of 40. Thanks to the favorable conditions, the mummy has been almost completely preserved to this day. The entire upper part of the skull, the skin on the back and shoulders, and a tuft of dark hair on the back of the head have survived. Next to the man, scientists discovered about 70 different items, including knives, baskets, and animal bones. They also found 2 woolen bags filled with ash and the bones of cremated people. Legal proceedings about the origin of the mummy began in 1996, when scientists conducted the first radiocarbon analysis, which showed that the mummy was 9,400 years old. Around the same time, representatives of the Shoshone tribe a Native American group that speaks languages of the Uto-Aztecan language family, claimed that the mummy belonged to them. The Shoshone demanded the remains be returned immediately under the Native American Graves Protection and Repatriation Act. But the scientists refused the request as the mummy's affiliation with any group hadn't been established. That's when the long legal proceedings began, which lasted for almost 20 years. Some scientists did not want to return the remains to the tribe, since the mummy held an honored place in the museum and revealed much about the ancient inhabitants of North America. 2 years ago, representatives of the Shoshone gave specialists permission to conduct the first genetic analysis of the mummy. The analysis showed that the man's remains are indeed of American origin. Scientists found out that this mummy was extremely important to the tribe, since the spirit cave holds sacred significance for them. Now, the mummy has been officially returned to the tribe. Give this video a thumbs up and share it with your friends. And as usual, I ask you to leave a kind comment under the video. Thank you for watching. Goodbye, everyone.